welcome back to another Touchpoint Group Insight session looking at the US national banks. And while we're already into 2023, but we're going to look back at 2022, a year in review, and look at the top stories, the top banks, and the things that really stood out for us over that period. Tony Patrick, really looking forward to the insights on this because it was a massive year in the US.
It was, Glenn. Thanks very much. So, yeah, today we're looking at the US nationals, so Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Chase. Now, and this time around, we actually will do a comparison across North America in this review as well, just to see where they sit. But let's see what's happened. Let's kick off with our normal approach, which is just looking at how these trends have gone across the whole year. So, one of the things we can see here is there's two sitting at the top here, which is Citibank and Wells Fargo. So sitting there at the top at sort of around above 4 at 4.2 and about 4.6, so doing very well and very consistent. The other one is looking at Wells Fargo about their app change at about February, March last year, and how that sort of improved across time up until December, where it's matching what it was about this time last year. So it's taken a while to get up, but they have actually improved up there as well. And we saw last time around the drop, which was we saw for Chase. They have picked up to some extent, but they are still in some sort of trouble there. They need to improve things from there as well. Let's have a look at this for consistency across the year. Let's have a look at what's going on across the whole year compared to the North American market. So here's a table. There's a lot just suddenly appeared in front of you. But I suppose one of the things you can have a quick look at is the color coding there. So you can see at the top there's probably like 5 or 6 which are basically always green. At the bottom, there's a similar number which are basically always red. And you can see in the middle, there's a mix of things going on. So if we look at the banks we're covering today in this US nationals, we've got Citibank, Bank of America. They're clearly in the top tier in terms of the US, in terms of all North America. We do have some Canadian banks in here as well. Above them is US Bank, and that's consistently number 1, and that's one of the leaders globally. They do very well. But I suppose this year, I'd like to, for last year, I'd like to give an award to a virtual award to Citibank for their scores across time. So they've remained very high and done very well, and they haven't been hit by some of the issues that other banks have. So well done to them. Also, I'd like to give probably both Citibank and Bank of America consistency awards because they've remained at that level and they haven't dipped down. They haven't sort of experienced those major issues that others seem to have had across time. So they've kept things under control to some extent. And the biggest story, which I mentioned up front, was around, I suppose, Wells Fargo with their drop away in February and March last year. And they have actually increased. It's been a slow sort of gradual increase, but they have now picked up to being that sort of around up towards 4. But they haven't hit 4 yet in last year. So hopefully they can do that in January and February to get things back to a level they're expecting with that new app release. So we can see there, even what I've got on the right here as well, is the rank across 2022 across all of North America, and also the Q4 rank. So you can see some things have moved in comparison, and also how they did in December in there as well. You can see in general, those top 3 tend to remain in that particular order all the way through as well. So let's move forward and have a look though, because just to see in review what's actually happened with some of these banks. So this here, some of you might recall, this is our SURF analysis. So looking at security and authentication, usability, reliability, and functionality. Now these numbers here, of course, we need to have these as low as possible because these are the pain points, the major pain points customers are having when they're using your app. And one of the things we can see is for Citibank, this is why it's doing so well, it has got these numbers down to a controllable level. In particular, for both Bank of America and Citibank, this authentication piece is down around 2%. So it's not very many people have issues with logging in and things like that. But across the board, we can see that the other two there, Wells and Chase, they do have those issues across the board and consistently. So, but of course, Wells has improved in the second half of the year. So this number for the second half of the year will be lower for them. But overall, there needs to be improvement across the board in that sort of logging in, reliability when they're using those journeys as well. Let's have a brief look at though. I'll just have a quick look in here. Even for Citibank, who's doing reasonably well or very well globally, we can even jump in and just have a look at some examples, particularly those of, let's jump in and actually find some particularly negative things. Let's go and find a few things in here. So they've still got room to grow, which is really good because there's, these things, you just think, well, they must be perfect. Well, not really. They've got people talking about the app keeps crashing, the sign-in doesn't work. Every time I enter ID and password, it says, fix the issue, please. So again, there's still issues, but they've been limited, which is really, really positive for them. So let's move forward and have a look at one other thing here, which is looking at the journeys. Now, looking at these core journeys. Now, this is something that customers see as the core journeys. These are the ones that they talk about, whether positively or negatively. They talk about these things as the major things they're trying to achieve with a banking app. Things like depositing checks, making P2P payments, etc. Now, these are the actual average scores when people talk about these particular topics. And one of the things, and of course here, the higher is better. You want to get as high as possible in this case. Now, one of the things I can see here, particularly for Citibank, is that they're doing very well on transferring between accounts, paying bills, monitoring account activity, and checking account balance. And we can see that they're above 4, and in some cases 4.5. Although they're not doing as well, they're not dominating in check deposits or making P2P payments. So obviously some room to improve there for them as well. So what I'd like to do now is have a look at the year in review of what I'll do. I'll go back here actually. So I will give you a second. I'll just get into this zone here. Let's have a look at US Nationals, the year in review of what I'll do. I'll just jump into here and show you what they've actually done across the year. So we'll look at this from a bank perspective. Let's jump into here and do that. And what I can do here is, this is across the year. I can look at Citibank and see how well they've gone in terms of the conversations going on inside, across the year. So what's the general conversations going on here? What I can do is have a look at this from this perspective here and have a look at it and see, in general, we can see it's all positive. So the coloring is very helpful. So this is where they dominate. So good service channel, good digital channel. The app operates well. There's good features and functionality and payment process. So it's very, very positive. You can see the vibe there is essentially very good. Let's have a look though. Let's go down and have a look at the next one here, which is obviously Bank of America. So slightly different. We get a very similar view in terms of things like good digital channel. We even get things like good app security, good financial services provider, but a few things start to pop out in red. So for example, which is why they're in second place, things like the account balance feature is in red there. Basic things like checking your account balance is not quite up to par. And things like funds transfer is slightly lower than average in there as well. But again, overall, very positive. Let's do a similar thing and go down to the next level, which is Chase. Obviously, from what we've seen in the earlier data, we're going to see a very different story here. Things like poor open and authenticate, poor service channel, poor authentication and things like that. So you can see clearly here there's been some issues with logging in and things like that. Let's have a look at Wells, who obviously had sort of two halves to the year, and they've done better in the second half. And for Wells, we can see in here, for them, it's very different though. We've got sort of some tech issues. So tech issues are the things that make them stand out across the year. Open and authenticate and security, there's a few bugs and things. So again, we think that they have those more under control this time around in the second half of the year, but they need to continue to improve on these as they move forward. So there we have it, a summary in review across the year. Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. And the theme for 2023 for me looking ahead is actually in and around using this sort of data to create efficiencies and cost savings in the business and reducing that customer churn. Because if we can look at these things and improve that experience, the volume of call center complaints, the number of call center calls that they're needing to support, as well as that customer churn with people leaving the app and leaving the bank, are going to dramatically reduce. And 2023, we know out there in this industry that reduction of churn and cost savings is going to be a massive focus for many banks out there. So I encourage you all to reach out to us if you wanted to have a chat And if you would like a copy of that ranking chart looking across North America, please send us a message. More than happy to send it out to you. Have a great day, folks.